So, on to our next speaker. There have been a couple of mentions of this alt.net thing previous today with Royce and Dylan's introduction, and I actually saw when I was googling around a little bit before this conference to do some research that Dylan, in a blog post from, I think, 2017, actually cited a blog post by our next speaker as the source for finding the alt.net movement. So our next speaker is even further back in that movement than Dylan was. And I think this is actually a personal reflection and a personal guess, but I actually think that our next speaker was quite instrumental when it comes to Microsoft's shift towards embracing open source as such. He told me before this event that he did set up a TikTok account recently, and that was, and I quote his own words, likely a huge mistake. And before this, I also checked Scott up a bit, and I found actually one thing that we have in common. And that is not the TikTok account. It is the fact that we have both had 0 cavities in our teeth. So if nothing else, I can bring home from today that I have one thing in common with Scott Hanselman. Please take the stage.
All right. Hey, friends. The pressure's on. Being the last one is really challenging, especially when we have such an amazing lineup. So can we just give another round of applause, not for me, but for all the great talks that you've seen all day long? So in the spirit of following all of these great talks, I just want to say right away, just lower your expectations. There's very, very little that's going to come from this talk. One of the things, though, that I get to do by being last is I get to watch all of the great talks and then frantically change my slides because my talk sucked. So I've just rewritten everything from scratch, incorporating new information that I learned from all of the great talks today. Right off the bat, I found out that my slides suck and are ugly, and my fonts are problematic. So the sad part is this was literally my title slide. Like I didn't change this one. That was my opening slide. So then Dylan goes and does this thing, and I'm like, crap, click. And then he's like, well, you could use bitmap fonts. And then they were like, well, you could do it like this. And I'm just really old, and that's very comforting to me. This is kind of like where I grew up and where my space was. But then everyone else's slides were better than mine, so I went and I added evocative stock photography of what like a computer person's desk looks like. Because isn't this what they're telling you, that this is the aesthetic of the computer person's desk? Everyone's area just looks like an IKEA showroom. This is actually what a computer person's desk looks like. That's what a real programmer's desk looks like, right? Now notice that I just said something interesting there. Let's see if you noticed it. I just said what a real programmer's desk looks like. The interesting thing about that statement is that it's bullshit. Because a real programmer's desk looks like your desk. Looks like whatever you want it to look like. And we want people to feel welcome no matter what they do. Now, I am old, and it turns out getting older, and I grew up in a time where when you thought of a programmer, you thought of a hacker, you thought of a certain kind of person, a certain kind of stereotype. But I was blessed to grow up in a time, though, where there was actually more inclusion in technology than just these stereotypes, and I would see things like this. This is one of my favorite magazines from 1984. We have a young lady here who's programming on her TI computer. She's chewing bubble gum, and she's coding and doing her thing. So tech became less inclusive after the mid-'80s and kind of had that low point. But we also had people to look up to, folks like Angelina Jolie in the classic movie Hackers, 1994. The part that is making me sad about this is I look around to some of the faces here and I see people who were born after 1994 who did not have the opportunity to see the classic Hackers movie in theaters. So let me just tell you, you're missing out. To tell you what a programmer looked like in the early 90s, I will show you Hanselman with hair. Look at that pretty man. That is a newspaper. Hey, if we don't mind, let's not clap about my hair loss. That doesn't help anybody. When a 4-head becomes a 5-head, everyone loses. That let me just tell you, no hair product. That was a natural Superman curl. That was not gel, which is a big thing to say. That's actually a picture of me just having been diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic. And as with all diabetics, the first thing that you do when you're diagnosed, if you're an engineer, is you try to solve it with software. So I wrote a diabetes management system on the Palm Pilot. And I got written up in the local newspaper, computer student does good stuff with sugar. Now, after this, something happened. That's an animated GIF of me aging. And I point this out because I have been now in tech for 31 years coding for money, and now 40 years coding for free. And as I'm heading towards the next couple of years, I'm planning my retirement, and I'm thinking about how I got here, what privileges that I have had, where luck played a role in my long career, and what it means to leave something behind. And we heard from folks all day about the difference. We heard from Nyari about building products or building people. And then those people that we build, we're not even going to see what turns out from them. I won't be here when the people I've influenced and helped and taught are truly, truly successful, and that's exactly how it's supposed to be. But we're also in a very strange time where we have more social media than we had when I was coming up, and the attitudes of these influencers has changed. And I watch people talking about, what's your favorite JavaScript framework, and buy my course, and it's only $19.95, and we have full-time JavaScript influencer people now whose only job it is to get you to buy their course. And then I saw this tweet where this individual said, it's this time of year, it's the end, it's December of 2022, there's going to be more hustle culture in my feed, social media influencers saying that if you don't get up at 3:30, then what are you even doing? This became really, really bad from the community's perspective during the pandemic, because people were actually saying stuff, well, if you didn't learn Chinese while on lockdown, what were you doing with all that free time? Right? The pandemic was an opportunity for you to start that business. And from my perspective, if you survived the pandemic, you're doing a great job, right? I mean, did you watch a lot of Netflix? I did. I didn't start a business. I didn't get up on time. I really find this hustle culture style of being to be really kind of offensive. It is setting an unreasonable expectation about how people are going to enter the technology space, and it's also not something that is sustainable. If you're going all the time, that's not a 30-year career, right? That's a 3 or 4 year career, and then you burn out and you quit. And when I thought about what it was that I have been the most fortunate about in the last 31 years of coding for money, it's that I'm here. I'm still here. And what a privilege that is. And why am I still here? Because I wasn't chased out of tech for any reason. There was nothing about me that caused people to be toxic towards me and get me kicked out of tech. So I tried to think about who is the least toxic, least hustle culture type person. I don't know what the Swedish equivalent is, but I do know that in America it's Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers taught us how to read, and he was very calm and very chill, and he would sing to us, and he was our children's television friend. And you can ask any American who they admire most, and it's going to go back and forth between Jesus and Mr. Rogers. And usually Mr. Rogers is considered more Jesus-like. He's super chill. And he would come in every morning and he would take off his outside shoes, and then he'd put on his inside shoes, and then he'd throw one of the shoes from one side of his hand to the other. And I have in fact, on my website, tried to emulate Mr. Rogers as much as I can. That classic, fun little shoe move was a Mr. Rogers staple. This picture on the right of Mr. Rogers was from the 60s, where one of the local police officers comes over to Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, and it's very hot, and Mr. Rogers invites him to be in the swimming pool and kind of get his feet wet, and he washes his feet. This is a small thing, and we wouldn't think anything of it today, but in the 60s, the idea that he's washing this black man's feet was a bit of a revolutionary thing, and a little bit of a stick it to the man opportunity there. So he was a peaceful and quiet and calm revolutionary, and I'm trying to model myself in that same way. And we've heard some conversations today, and if you know me online, you know I talk about inclusion a lot. There's this quote that comes up a lot that I have mixed feelings about, which is diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. That's fine of a quote. But I really like this one here that says diversity is going to a party, but inclusion is being part of the party planning committee. You know how people are always talking about we need to make another seat at the table. Who designed the table? Who's the table manufacturer? Who do we buy the table from? We should be designing tables differently. Let's buy a bigger table. Like, who are the table people? Go upstream. That's how we make things truly inclusive. Otherwise, we're going to do what's called Power Ranger diversity. You ever watch the Power Rangers? Like 5 people, and they're all each a specific color. But you only have one black guy, you only have one Chinese person. That's fake diversity. That is artificial Power Rangers diversity, where you pick one of each and you go, good job. Pat myself on the back for being inclusive. The word inclusion causes diversity. If you are inclusive, the diversity happens. Because the thing that's so interesting about that word inclusion is that it is the opposite of exclusion. All you have to do is actively choose not to exclude people by your actions, and things will work themselves out. As an example, the paparazzi are here. Action pose. Action pose. I've got this podcast that I've been doing now for 17 years. I have done 882 episodes of the podcast every Thursday for the last 17 years. And it's an interesting thing. Notice how my podcast guests look like the mall. Isn't it funny? I mean, I love that everyone's here, but this is a pretty inclusive group of people, but you want to have technology be representative. You want it to look like society and the society of the country or the space that you're in. And the way that you do that is by actively not excluding people and by not participating in what are called manels, which is a panel of all dudes. A thing that you can do if you're a man who's been invited to join a manel is say no. You don't have to be on the manel. You can literally just say, I'm going to go ahead and just make space for someone else and then not be on the manel. These are easy things to do. By the way, I'm still scrolling. I just wanted to point out that there's a lot of shows. Notice how I'm not running out of cool people. Isn't that funny? I heard that there was a pipeline problem in tech. Maybe there are really talented people that just maybe haven't gotten an opportunity, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. Now, diversity also includes other aspects of things, including invisible things, whether it be ADHD or something invisible about you, or maybe you're a veteran, or maybe you have some trauma. For me, my type 1 diabetes is something that is invisible. I'm a tall, straight white guy. I look like a regular person, but I've got a bunch of medical implants that are keeping me, where's the other one? Over here, keeping me alive. And they're plugged into my body and they're plugged into the cloud, but I don't have to show you that. So my privilege is to hide that and just be myself. But putting me on a project, if it's a healthcare project, adds an interesting new voice that isn't related to my race, my age, or my gender. And that's why diverse teams really make a better product, because if you get different voices with different perspectives, really interesting things start happening. Now, the opposite of this is called gatekeeping. And the opposite of this is just keeping everything to yourself and keeping everything hidden. And this is real similar to this idea of the priesthood, the technology priesthood. We learned about the Gutenberg Bible. One of the things that Dylan didn't talk about was who could read it. Only the priests could read it, though. And they would go, look at this amazing, but don't touch it. Just look at the Bible. I shall read it to you. You gather round and I'll read you the Bible. Because there's a control mechanism there to keep the plebs not able to read. And isn't it awful what we've done in tech? By making it hard, we've created the techies and the non-techies. And I'm sure you all have that feeling when you go to your parents' house for holidays and they feel awful about it, but they say, could you just look at the router? Could you fix the printer? I haven't been able to print since last Christmas. Right? We all have to do that kind of IT support. And what they always say is, I must have done something to it. It was probably me. I'm so sorry. I'm not a computer person. The computers are there to serve the people, and here we are convincing them that it was their fault that they're broken. We've made them feel bad. We've gone and we have put them down as if we were the experts that didn't want them to go and understand how things work. Now, I know no one in here wants that to happen. We don't want to be gatekeepers. What are gatekeepers? Gatekeepers are people at a high level, these data decision makers that control the flow of information. Information wants to be free, and we don't want to let it seem difficult, more hard. We want to make sure that information is available. And as I come up on this 31 years, and thinking about retirement, I'm thinking about all the stuff that I know. And it's going to go if I don't tell somebody. So I have to figure out how to get that information out so that it can be available and Googled or ChatGPT'd or whatever, so that a young person could find that information and it doesn't just die with me. So I've been encouraging people that are on the other side of their career, on the waning side, to really share their energy. Put out good work. Don't waste your keystrokes. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then share your experiences as much as you possibly can. And like Mr. Rogers, be as kind as possible. Be as specifically nice as possible. And if you do that at scale for a very long time, it will come back to you, both karmically and in positive energy. So we can agree that hustle culture is not healthy. The idea to wake up, kick ass, and repeat is not comfortable. And that stuff that everyone told us during the pandemic that we should do that is really difficult. Now, when everyone got quarantined a couple years ago, they would call me because I was a known remote worker. I've been at Microsoft for 15 years, and I have never once worked in the Microsoft office. I've worked remotely, like 300 kilometers away. So I'm the remote guy at Microsoft. I was working remote at Microsoft when it wasn't cool. So everyone was like, hey, we're all quarantined now. What's a remote worker tip, right? That's like someone going to jail and staying in solitary confinement and then calling me and saying, hey, you're a remote worker. What's it like? Can you give me any tips on being in quarantine in jail here? It's a totally different thing. And we started to see pressure from people to like overwork, particularly in young people. I have people on my team that I hired 2 years ago, straight out of college, that have never been in the office, and I've never met them. That can't be good. That's very challenging. And imagine what it must feel like to be so excited, to be that little girl with the bubblegum programming, and you get so excited, and then you have your first job, and you're still in your mom's house on your computer 8 hours a day on Teams. And this is tech. That can be extremely challenging. So I've been trying to coach the young people as they move through this process to really avoid overworking and avoid doom scrolling. Are you familiar with this word, doom scrolling? This is that thing that we all do at night where the day is over, the kids are in bed, and you're there and you're just scrolling, just looking for doom. Any more climate change, bad stuff that's happening, is Trump going to win again? What bad stuff that could possibly stress me out about? And in fact, there's a word for this. I don't know the exact Japanese word. I'm not going to butcher the Japanese word, but the English expansion of the Japanese word is revenge nighttime procrastination. This is a real thing. Go and Google with Bing for revenge nighttime procrastination. What this is it's you taking revenge on yourself at night and saying, I'm getting my day back. The company took it from me, darn you, late stage capitalism, I want it back. So I'm going to stay up later till 1 or 2 or 3 in the morning, doom scrolling to get revenge so I can have my evening back. And now I'm in a situation where my kids who used to go to bed at 6 and then 9 and then 10:30 are now up with us doom scrolling at midnight on a weekday. And then you go to bed and you wake up and you do it all over again. We got to stop doing that. We got to stop doing that. So we as techies and as a community, and what I'm trying to get across to you is to encourage you to try to be as deliberate and intentional with your information, with your practice, with how you write your software, how you make your space for yourself and for others, and be present. I want to talk about that in the context of many years' experience, but I'm going to start with my quarantine space. When lockdown happened, I set up my little home office, right? The one that I had been remote at so long. And I noticed that some of the people at work didn't have really nice home offices. Sometimes it's because you live in a small space, but really it was just because they just picked whatever space was near them. One lady actually had the pantry where they kept like the beans, and that became her office. So you could see the shelves with all of the cereal and everything. And I asked her if that was an intentional decision, and she's like, no, the children just kind of pushed me into this space. But then she eventually took all the food out and turned it into a home office, and it became very kind of cool and cozy, because what she did is she made a nest for herself. Rather than organically just letting it happen and not realizing why she's stressed out, she took that opportunity to make the pantry, the kitchen pantry, a little home office. And by intentionally making a space for herself, she became more comfortable. One of the young people that I hired, the one I mentioned, who is in LA, the background that we see is just a white wall. And I said, is that a real wall? Is that a Zoom background? What's going on there? And she's like, no, it's just this empty room that I have. And I was like, does it feed your spirit? Does it spark joy? She's like, well, I never really thought about it. I just kind of like, I roll out of bed, I walk 5 feet, and then I'm in the other room, and it has no stuff on the wall. I said, well, you should make space for yourself. She's like, yeah, I should. And there was just a moment there where she goes, well, yeah, I absolutely should. And now there's movie posters and in little characters and what are those little bobblehead dudes? You know, like this, she's putting space in her space. She's putting stuff in her space that sparks joy. And in doing that, she woke up for a second. And that moment of waking up allows her to be more intentional and be more deliberate. The other thing that we can try to do is find our people, like we have today. Coming to Beauty and Code is a way of finding your people. And calling back to Pelanomi's reference to Ubuntu means people are people through other people. You are only a person within the context of your community. If you're alone, you're just alone. But once you've found your people and they lift you up and they make you better, then you will be a more complete person. So finding your tribe is super important in these difficult times, and I'm glad that everyone here has. And you should make sure to guilt all of the people whose badges are still left out there. Because I was like, who doesn't come to Beauty and Code? You bought a ticket, your badge is right there. I almost wanted to like take pictures and say, are you okay? Do you need me to watch the kids? Why didn't you come to Beauty and Code? We ask ourselves, is this the time to create? A lot of people have information like myself that I want to get out, but they're like, I don't want to write a blog. I'm not an expert in that thing. Yes, you are. Everybody's an expert at something. You should write that blog. You should make that TikTok. Yeah, I'm an old man on TikTok, but I'm having a blast. I'm having fun. I'm spreading the word, and I'm helping young people get in tech. I mentioned before conserving keystrokes. I've been trying to write in my blog consistently for the last 20 years, every Tuesday and Thursday. I've taken a break from last year, but I do have 20 years of over 100 blog posts every year. And the way that you do that isn't by hustle culture. It's by not sending email. It's like, how do we find the time? Well, think about all the time you waste sending email to people. Let's say that afterwards, like you send me an email, and I'm like, you're very nice. You send me an email, you have a great question. I'm like, oh, what a great question. That question was a gift. But I don't know you. I don't know you that well. You've emailed me before. I'm not going to waste my keystrokes and give you the gift of 2,000 of my keystrokes, and then you're going to be like, thanks. And then the keystrokes are gone. But the question was a gift. So what can I do to solve that problem? I put the keystrokes anywhere with a URL. Anywhere with a URL. Medium, Twitter, your blog, Facebook, whatever. Hopefully somewhere that you own, a domain that you own. And then I send you a link to it. And then I go to sleep. And then 3 other people visit my blog overnight. And it's as if I emailed 3 people. And if you do that kind of stuff at scale, you think about all those emails that you've written at work where you had to scroll. Don't ever scroll in an email. If you scroll in an email, you've written too much. Take all of that text and put it in SharePoint or OneDrive or anywhere at all with a URL, and then send the URL instead. Get those keystrokes working for you. You have a finite number of keystrokes left in your hands before you die. And if your argument is, well, I'm not an expert, I don't want to write anything about that, we're all amateurs. Nobody knows what they're doing. Nobody was born knowing YAML. Even the people who made YAML don't like YAML. Really? Some kid at work was telling me, oh, you should do that in YAML. I was doing it in XML, and I said, I'm going to do it in XML because angle brackets were good enough for my grandfather. They're good enough for me. Well, what about JSON? Oh, you mean XML with curly braces? That's the same thing, dude. It's all the same. It doesn't matter. There are no professionals. At Microsoft, we see this interesting thing that with people of different levels will make you feel kind of bad because they'll question how many years experience you have. So sometimes you'll be at Microsoft and someone will say, I've been here at Microsoft 20 years. Been here at Microsoft for 20 years. It's like, really? You've been here 20 years, so you have 20 years experience here at Microsoft. Yeah, 20 years. Came right out of college. Is it 20 years or is it the same year 20 times? You've only worked on calculator the entire time, dude. There's only so I know how to write ship software, ship calculator. The reason that I point this out is that I've got 30 years experience, but I got to be honest with you, I really don't have 30 years experience. Because 7 of those years, I was mostly on Reddit, just hanging out. So I really have about 23 years experience if you subtract the Reddit years. And by that, I just mean those kind of sleepy, chilling kind of years where you didn't really learn anything. You just kind of like, ooh. It kind of happens. It's kind of the equivalent of like, when you're driving your car and you wake up in the middle of the driving, you go, I just went like 4 blocks. You weren't asleep, like your eyes were open, but you just kind of went, oh shit, I'm driving. Whoa! It just happens because you're on autopilot. That kind of autopilot can happen at work, and you can lose a month. You can blink and it's Thursday. So I've decided to stop doing that. I'm trying to intentionally wake up as much as possible. I've even set appointments on my calendar at work called Wake Up. I'm not joking, because it's a moment to go, what the fuck am I doing here? Oh, okay. What should I be working on? That's important. Am I happy with this week? What can I do to set up myself today for success so I don't go home feeling bad and then feel that I have to work late and then wake up the next morning and then feel guilty about this crappy week that I had? I need to forgive myself, reset, wake up, start over. The young lady at work who's early in career was telling me that she screwed up and she made a mistake at work. She felt really bad about it. And she kept mentioning it for weeks. And I said, listen, you screwed up. She's like, yeah. I said, you've been telling me this for 2 weeks. She's like, yeah. I said, you have 10 more minutes. Set a timer, and then you're done. Feel really, really bad. Just compress it into 10 minutes and feel just awful. Like maybe freak out in the parking lot of Walmart or Co-op or something. I do that. I feel bad. I put a time limit on it, and then I release it to the universe. I screwed up, and now it's over. And that was really like a moment of being very freeing for them, because you don't get to do something for 30 years if you're going to go, oh, God, and you just remember that time in 1997 when you took down production because you remote desktoped into the wrong machine and suddenly rebooted something. Like, we all have those stories. But the idea that it's going to cause me to wince in 2023 and I don't forgive myself is important. These are all tips for someone to have a long, long career in whatever they're interested in. Now, I did joke about it during the pandemic, if you didn't learn Chinese, you didn't do that. We did spend, my wife and my kids and I, 4 years learning Taekwondo. And a couple of 18 months of it was during the pandemic, and we all ended up getting our black belt, our first dan black belt at the same time. And at this point, I thought I was a badass, right? To go from basically being a slap fighter to now being a slap fighter with the occasional kick to the knees is very powerful for an old man. And I'm a black belt, right? So don't mess with me. But I'm a first dan black belt. And I thought that I'd achieved. All right, first dan, how's it going? The gentleman that taught me had been doing it since 1968. He's a 9th dan. And he's like, all right, let's fight. And then I could see the ceiling, and I wondered, how did I get on the floor? And what happened here? He just wanted to remind me that being a first dan black belt was the beginning. We had busted our ass for 4 years for him to tell me, all right, now let's get to work. It was a total reset. And we went from being, wow, we're at the end, this is amazing, look at our achievement, to the, wow, we're always going to be at the beginning, and we should stop trying to pretend that we've actually, gotten to the end. That was super important for me, kind of psychologically, because, sometimes I do go, I had 30 years of experience. But then someone will show me new AI technologies in Africa or ChatGPT, and I'll just go, I don't have any idea how that works. Is that written in Visual Basic? Because I don't know. I could do that if it was in YAML. Every technology that I learned in college is gone. Every language, every operating system that my degrees are in are all dead. I have a 3-page CV. Fancy. I have a 3-page CV because I'm a freaking rock star. Problem is, page 2 is the 90s. And during the 90s, we learned how to scale a web farm horizontally. That is now a checkbox in Azure. So now I have a 2-page resume. That the first page is page 1 and the second page is page 3. And we don't know what happened to page 2 because now it's a checkbox. And the young people just click a button and they go, this web farm is taking like a minute to scale. Blah. And then I'm now old man who shakes fist at cloud. Like, we used to fly consultants in to scale a web farm. In my day. This gentleman here is Tim Berners-Lee. He invented the World Wide Web. Whenever I start to feel myself and I get a little bit like, hey, I'm a senior engineer, 30 years experience, I remember that Tim Berners-Lee did not put senior on his title. Which I think isn't the real flex. The real flex is that he didn't put the. Can you imagine dropping a business card in a meeting? Web developer, senior web staff, the. Holy shit. Tim Berners-Lee, you're amazing. That's humility. So in this journey of mine towards basically being obsolete and retiring, I've started to kind of unpack this knapsack of my own privileges and trying to figure out why I'm here. I was the first one in my family to go to college. I don't know where a lot of the kids that I went to high school with. My mom was a zookeeper. My dad was a firefighter. There's no one in tech anywhere in my space in any direction. I don't know why I'm wired like this. But I do know that I am incredibly lucky, and a non-trivial amount of my success in tech is luck. And in that luck is a backpack full of privilege. Now, we have to dissect that then. Why am I lucky? Because sometimes people get triggered when you say, oh, you're pretty lucky. I worked hard. I never said you didn't, dude. I just said you were also lucky. Two things can be true at the same time. But we're still here. I'm still here. I am here because of this luck. So we take this luck apart and we think about all the different pieces of luck. Talk about the small luck. Talk about the big luck. Talk about the diversity of luck. But what luck is its opportunities that present themselves and then being prepared. And what's interesting is that I did the work. I was prepared. I worked hard. I know my stuff. And then all of these opportunities presented themselves. But for different people from different spaces, they may be as prepared or more, but they cannot get luck because opportunities don't present themselves. The opportunity can be as simple as putting on a suit. But when I put on a suit, you can't tell that I grew up poor. I'm just an American English speaker in a suit, right? There's nothing about me that says any kind of economical privilege, because as soon as you put a suit on, all white dudes are dudes in suits. That can be really, really interesting, though, because someone has either a physical disability, or if they're a different color, or they're short or tall, or whatever, you can look at them and say, this is a woman, this is a man, this person's black, this person's Asian, and then you can make judgments, suit or not. And then somehow opportunities don't necessarily happen. However, there is something beyond mentoring people that can create luck. Now, luck, people feel like, is a resource that is very limited. There's not an unlimited amount of luck. But I started realizing that there is a resource that is in fact unlimited, and that is privilege. And there is I have an unlimited amount of privilege. I don't like run out. Like I don't like go at the end of the day and like, oh crap, it's 4 o'clock and I'm already out of privilege. How am I going to make it home? Right? No, privilege is like always having $5 in your pocket. Always. There's always extra $5 that you can get. So what do I do with this resource? What I do is I create luck for other people. We can help them get prepared. We can make schools, right? We can develop systems and projects, but that only does half of the luck equation. Only half of the luck equation is the being prepared part. How do we do opportunity? Well, what I thought I was supposed to do as an older man in tech was I'll mentor someone. I'm going to mentor. I'm going to mentor all the babies. Bring me the babies and I will mentor the babies. It's going to be great. And I mentored. And then it turned out that what I was bringing to the mentorship experience was just what's called big dad energy. It was a weekly lecture from an old man. You got to work harder in tech like I did, and let me learn some HTML. And it's going to be amazing. You're going to have a great career. All right, I'll see you next week. That's not what people need. In fact, underrepresented folks, and actually let's not even call them underrepresented, let's call them underestimated, people in tech are over-mentored. They got all the advice that they need. So I hope that no one here leaves and goes, well, I'm going to go find the one person that I know that doesn't look like a typical Swede, and I'm going to mentor the hell out of them, and it's going to be great. They don't need that. What they need is opportunity. And mentorship isn't the answer. What it is it's sponsorship. Sponsorship is what makes it happen. We're going to use our privilege for good causes. Maybe you need to find a mentor, right? Maybe I need to find a mentor. So rather than me thinking, oh, I'm old and I'm senior and I'm going to go and start mentoring people, I went and I found a young person to mentor me. And I started listening. This is what I need to listen to, and this is what do y'all need? What do you actually need? This is actually one of the things that they teach you in management class. When you go and you have a team, actually ask your team how they want to be managed. People here are managers. I see some managers in the room. You probably have one-on-ones and stuff where they give you a status report and then you leave the one-on-one. Has anyone ever actually asked the person on the other side of the one-on-one, what do you want to get from our one-on-ones? They will blow their minds. How do you want to be managed? Well, they're going to say, well, don't text me on the weekends for starters, right? There's going to be different stuff that they want. So find a mentor, be a mentor, but let's break apart mentorship and sponsorship, okay? This is a separate thing. Mentors can help you guide your dream. They can be there. They can be like a little mini therapist. They can identify your strengths and stuff. But sponsors are spotlighters. Sponsors think about you when you're not in the room. And they go, I just got invited to speak at Beauty and Code. Maybe you should come with me. And now I've brought you into a space. Or, I have a team and there's like 10 different people and they all finished some project and we're going to go and present it to the VP. Why is it always me that does the presentation? Maybe one of the people who actually did the work should do that. Let's bring them into a room they're not ordinarily in and let them have that space. Are they prepared? Did we create an opportunity? Literally invented unlimited luck, which made me realize that there was a privilege I didn't realize that I had. That wasn't an identity privilege, it was level privilege. Has anyone here ever gotten promoted, had their title change at work, like senior or staff or something in their, and suddenly people started answering your emails faster? That is a thing at big companies. People's titles change and emails get faster. I didn't realize that I was actually spell checking very carefully emails I sent to my vice president, but I will just send the sloppiest crap emails downstream into my team. And I was like, what's going on? Well, I don't want to waste this person's time. So I was treating people with higher levels differently. So if I have this level privilege at work, I need to use it because I have unlimited amounts. So let's start breaking up then what sponsorship is. It's a spectrum. There's all kinds of different sponsors. There's sponsors that can strategize. How are we going to get you this promotion? How are we going to make that happen? There's connector ones. Oh, have you met Jimmy? Jimmy, have you met? So you should talk. And then step back. And now you've made a connection. You've made an opportunity. A lot of us have these stories about how we got our first job, and maybe our mom or dad knew someone, or we bumped into someone on the bus and they had a business card. That's the opportunity, that's the moment. And if you're prepared for that business card or that meeting, then that's luck. And then we'll tell those stories years later and we'll say, well, I worked hard, and an opportunity presented itself, and that was the moment that my whole career started. But it might be the way that you looked or how you were dressed that particular day. If you had looked differently or been a different person, you may not necessarily have gotten that business card. Or if you grew up somewhere else, maybe your mom or dad wouldn't have known that president of IBM that gave you your first internship. The other thing that people need to realize about sponsorship is that it's not forever. I've seen people create very awkward mentor-sponsorship relationships because they don't realize they don't have to do them for eternity. So when you start sponsoring someone or start mentoring someone, decide when it ends or decide when it enters a new phase. So why are we doing this? Why are we hanging out? Well, I want to become better at C#. I want to become a senior engineer. I want to speak at my first international conference. All right, that's our goal. And then we run. We don't sprint, though, because sprinting is bad, towards that goal at a leisurely but comfortable pace, right? With our scrum partners. What we do, though, is we do it deliberately and intentionally, and we don't just simply accept the defaults. This idea of waking up, that's like hitting custom in an installer. Because you know how you ever start running an installer on your Windows machine? You're like, next, finish. Oh, I just screwed up my computer. Well, you should probably slow down and probably push custom and see what it just added to your path. I am now, as I get towards the later years in my career, always pressing custom, and I do not accept the defaults because I want to see what those possibilities are. Now, as we get towards the end here, I have time to do some stories that I think are fun in the space of mentorship and sponsorship. And these are just things that have happened to me that I have found interesting that I tell to mentees and sponsees, if that's a word. About how I think about software, with the recognition that they can't know the historical context that I have because they weren't using computers in the 80s, and that's okay. So I'm encouraging my mentees to be T-shaped technologists. Have you ever heard that term? Be a T-shaped developer, right? You want to be broad in a number of skills and then deep in some core thing. I'm bumping into a lot of young people right now that know everything about JavaScript, except that it's not really an operating system, and that there's something underneath that. Like Chrome isn't actually an operating system as much as you would like it to be, even though they call it that in a Chromebook. Like Linux is a thing. So having those core understandings, going one level below your comfort zone, is super important. Now, I tried to think about an idol or a person in my life that represented the most T-shaped individual that I could think of. And I thought for a while it might have been Batman, because I think of him as being really good at a lot of things and having some deep understanding. But then I realized it's actually Fabulous Batman, because Fabulous Batman is better than regular Batman because he's also a ballerina and a fairy and he's a Lego man. And he's freaking Batman, the world's greatest detective. So I literally have Fabulous Batman on my desk in front of me. So during those moments when I wake up or I'm in a meeting and I'm trying to remember who I want to be, I don't want to just copy someone else. I kind of want to do my own thing. And I think Fabulous Batman is a pretty freaking awesome example of that. So when I'm presented with a series of problems in technologies, I think to myself, what would Fabulous Batman do in this problem? So let's talk a little bit about a few things as we get towards the end here. Some problem solving, how you problem solve in tech, particularly when you're talking to early in career people, how we manage layering in large systems, compositing systems, and patterns. So problem solving is that thing that is so funny when a senior person at work can look at something and you've been pounding your head against a wall for days and they'll go, semicolon, right? And then Dylan Beatty will just walk away like this. It's because I got it like that. Movable type, baby. Problem solving is just yes, no questions at scale, but you don't know what questions to ask. But when we gain experience, we do. Now remember at the very beginning I was reflecting on, I'm still here. The greatest privilege that I have is a 30-year career in tech. So when you start mentoring people, when you're teaching people, when you are sponsoring people, that's got to be your goal, for them to be still here. I had a safe place to fail fast and at scale. The only difference between us, those with 20, 30 years experience, and some people here who might only be 3 or 4 years into their career, is that nobody chased us out, we're still here, we didn't have a toxic boss, and we know stuff. And you know how you solve that problem at work? Because you're like, oh, semicolon. How did you know that? Well, because I banged my head against a wall for 3 days for once for the semicolon, and now you've done it as well. And now go forth and find the other semicolons, the other people have had. So I was teaching at Black Girls Code, and they were like, hey, this white guy's going to teach us how to code, yay. Hey, kids. And they're all 14-year-old girls at a high school. And I said, we're going to learn how to code, kids, yay. All right, everybody. My toaster's broken. Just make it really awkward, because cringe is what the kids like. I learned that on TikTok. So I'm bringing that big dad energy, right? So I said, hey kids, my toaster's broken, and before we can code, we're going to have to solve this toaster situation here. What are we going to do? And you know, some of the kids are just getting started. They're 14-year-old kids, and they're like, I don't know, buy a new toaster. And then I go off on a rant about late-stage capitalism and being wasteful and, you know, how that's not the way to think about things. And I said, no, let's think about it as a system. Let's think about systems thinking. And there's going to be an interesting thing here to figure out who comes up with this answer first. One of the young ladies says, well, is the power on? I said, okay, that's good. I'm asking you about toast, but you're thinking about the context in which the toast exists, right? And one lady said, plug in another thing to see if that thing lights up, like plug in a light, right? So now we're doing some bisecting. One young lady said, well, maybe check the fuse. My dad says there's a fuse in the garage. Maybe that's the issue. And then someone else said, well, does the house have power? Is there load shedding, right? Do the neighbors have power? Think about that for a second. I wanted hot bread. And suddenly someone is over here saying, well, does the neighbors have power? Was it an EMP? Were there aliens? Has there been an attack? You can only do that by understanding the context and the system by which the toaster operates. This is the It's Always DNS equivalent of debugging toaster. It's probably going to be power. The difference between an early in career person and a later in career person is the early career person just Googles a lot, and the later in career person can eliminate an entire class of questions with just asking. So I made a list without Googling. I just made a list of all the things I would check if my website were down. And in the using one of our great American presidents, Abraham Lincoln, whose famous quote, "It's always DNS," I made a list on the left here. It's true, I read it on the internet. Actually, ChatGPT told me that he said that, so it must be true. These are all the things that I would potentially check. That's not something that a 17-year-old who's just got it started can just come up with a list. I could probably make you a 20 or 30-page document about all the things to check. You could too. Why? Because you're still here. Because you're still here. So the way that we get this into their brains is not by making them work harder, it's by also allowing them the space to still be here. Do you see? Now there is one kind of trick one on here though that you may have noticed, which says it's never twins. Because in Sherlock Holmes, there's always a situation where there's the wife who's like a bride, and on her wedding night she kills her husband, and then Sherlock Holmes comes in, and then Watson is like, hang on, how could she have done it? Because she was seen on the other side of town, so she has an alibi. She must be twins. There's twin people, and then Sherlock Holmes always says, Holmes would have been twins? No, it's never twins. There's just certain things that we do that. We find ourselves saying, oh, it's DNS, but it'll never be that, or it'll never be this. We know those things because we have the experience. Now, if we apply these kinds of understandings to like layering in large systems, layering is when you have abstractions, where each layer of abstraction is indistinguishable from magic. You're hiding complexity. You realize that layering is really just lying. You're just lying to yourself, right? And a lot of these systems that we use all the time, we actually probably already know that they're lying to us. So like here's email. So here's me attaching a big-ass file. And no one's ever, unless you've actually written an email, SMTP, low-level emailer, no one here, no matter how long you've been in tech, probably knows what email looks like behind. It's just a very niche kind of thing. But if you go and look at it, it's actually just name-value pairs. Turns out, here's a little secret about the internet and all of computers in the last 70 years, it's all just name-value pairs. All of it, doesn't matter. XML, YAML, email, it's just INI files. It's name, file. It's every computer, everything's just a hash table. Redis, it's a lie, hash tables. SQL Server, hash table. Blockchain, sorry, hash table. Look at this hash table, email. Here is an HTTP post. Doesn't that look suspiciously like an email? Everyone here has seen an HTTP post before. You've pushed F12, right? We've all been mentoring a young person and we go, let me view source, show you what's really happening. F12, oh my God, it's the source code to the internet. Blows their minds, right? Wait till they hear about assembler. In this case here, HTTP and email, it's just name-value pairs. It's just text. And then you start learning about ports and TCP, and you realize it's all the same. It's all the same. I remember when hard drives came out. Hard drive on the left there. What's on the right? Record player. Data encoded in a circle with a head that comes down and listens to it in the circle. It's all the same. It's all the same. Reuse good ideas. Then we can start composing these things, plugging them in together. And once you have that ability, that power, whether you're an old person in tech or a young person in tech, you can start doing some really cool stuff. Now there's this TV show, I don't know if you all have this on the Netflix. Do you have Altered Carbon? Anyone watch Altered Carbon? Altered Carbon is this cool sci-fi show, you should check it out. And the idea is you can't travel to other planets because it would take too long. So you beam your consciousness into another sleeve, another body. So I don't want to go there. So they put my stuff on like a USB key, and then they beam it to Mars or another planet, and then they put me in another body, and that body could be a different gender, different race, different whatever, and then they kill me on the previous planet because you can't have two of me. So it's got to be an immutable operation. It's kind of a blockchain. And see how I fit something from every talk into this talk? Right? So the smart contract beams me to another planet, and I'm in the other sleeve. And what's cool about the show is that there's 2 seasons. Unfortunately, it didn't get renewed for a 3rd season. The idea was each season would be a different actor. But it's the same dude. So like the first one, he's this tall white guy, and the second one, it's Anthony Mackie, who's Captain America, and it's awesome. Now, in that show, there's this AI, and he's Edgar Allan Poe. He's a hotel called the Raven, and the good guy runs into the hotel to stay because he's got to get away from the bad guys, and the hotel has this AI hologram that shows up. It's Edgar Allan Poe. And he's played by this guy, Chris Connor, who's a character actor. So you got Captain America right here, and then another guy. He's kind of just a working actor. Nice guy. But he's not famous. He's a B actor, or what do you call it, a working character actor. Now, I could tweet Anthony Mackie and he wouldn't answer me. But I've developed this habit where if I see a show that I really like, I will always find the actors that are like smaller and tweet them, "You did a great job." And then they'll like the tweet. And I'll be like, that's my new friend. You know what I mean? But I also feel like they're just regular people. They're just like, hey, stars, they're just like us. So they must like to be told that hey, I saw your episode of Law and Order. You did a great job. Good. Oh, thanks for watching, All the best for your continued success. So I did that, and I tweeted this guy. And he says, hey, thanks a lot. I had a lot of fun playing the character. And it said he was in Portland, Oregon. I am in Portland, Oregon. So at this point, you got to shoot your shot, right? Because you miss all the shots you don't take. And I said, hey, I see you're in Portland. Can I offer you a taco? I said, maybe come on the podcast. Thinking this guy's going to block me immediately and move on, right? And he's like, totally, let's do it. Holy crap. I'm doing a podcast with a famous guy from Netflix. So I take my portable recorder, and we do the podcast, and he's freaking amazing, and he shows up, and he's wearing an ascot, which is the way that you look European, even though you're not European. I've been watching some of the Swedish fashion. It's fantastic. You just take a regular-looking person, you put on like a scarf, and it makes them European. It's amazing. That's how you can tell who's American and who's not around here. And it's cool though, and I do the podcast, and it's amazing, and I'm like, I'm gonna leave this man. I'm gonna leave my wife, and I'm gonna spend the rest of my life with this man. We have this bromance that we're developing. It's great. And I go home and I tell my wife how I'm now friends with this guy. I'm not really friends with this guy. And then I plug the SD card into the computer. And it's not just like, disk error. It actually said the disk was fine. It was the infinitely recursing folders with no name. Not even a space. They're just empty. So originally my plan was to leave my wife and kids and marry this guy, which is weird because I'm straight. But now I have to move. I have to block his number and leave the country. There's literally, what do I do? Hey, remember that time we spent together? It's gone. So the only thing that I could do at this point is learn how file allocation tables work. So I start digging into the internal code of the file allocation table and byte for byte rebuilding the bits that represent all of the files, because I knew that it was there somewhere. It just must have been. Anyway, so I spent 18 hours rebuilding this byte by byte for scratch, found the files, and here's the funny part, right? I don't know how to do any of this. I'm not a low-level programmer, right? But layers. The sense that I could do it if I needed to, right? That's like my toxic trait, is that I could probably do that, right? I'm a web developer. I don't know anything about file allocation tables, but I do know that the computer is lying to me. So I just went down the layers. Now, I've since forgotten that information, but I will point out again that I went and I wrote it up on my blog. So I can get that information back if I need it. Write that stuff down. And that, writing it down and living technology for so many years, is how you become a senior developer. Pattern recognition. I've seen that before. And the only way you can say, I've seen that before, is if people let you stay in tech for 30 years, which is what we want for the next generation. One time, I spent 13 hours debugging a segmentation fault on a Raspberry Pi in .NET Core, and I had a good executable that would work consistently, and I had a bad executable, and I finally did a diff in a diff tool here, and I went here and I noticed that on the good one there were a bunch of 0Ds, and on the bad one they were gone. Okay, where are my old programmers at? Why does the bad one have missing 0Ds? Come on, somebody here is old. Why? You know it. I spent 13 hours on this. Someone's going to go, well, it was that, you dummy. Anyone? What? Close. The other one. Carriage return. I was stripping carriage returns out during the FTP process. So think about that. And then we all go, oh, yeah, skipping the carriage return with the FTP process. What is a carriage? Why is it returning? And what's FTP? Those are the questions that a young person would ask. There was a checkbox in my FTP tool that said, treat files without extensions as ASCII. It was stripping out random 0Ds, which is a 13, which is a carriage return. I tell a kid at school, I tell the whole story. Doesn't land, like a lot of my jokes at this conference. And they go, what's a carriage? Why is it returning? So then I get a really cool cowboy hat, and I call myself Dylan, and I say, well, 1865, the typewriter is created, and there's a carriage, and on the carriage, which is a lot like a horse and carriage, but this carriage carries paper. And when that carriage gets to the end of the typewriter, it's got to return. So the carriage returns, but then you've got to feed the line. So you go, ding, Carriage return, line feed. And then you tell the story about how Linux does just line feeds and Windows does carriage returns and Mac and Windows sucks, Microsoft with a $sign. And then you share how you went and one day you built a typewriter from Legos from scratch and they appreciate it or they don't. But now they know that the reason that their Git repository has been corrupted is because we're still thinking about carriage returns and line feeds from 70 years ago. So then the question is, do they know to just go and put on git crlf auto and never know what crf auto means? Or do they want a history lesson once a week from an old man who is excited that he knows these things? The way that you solve that problem is you simply ask them. Isn't that funny? It's called mansplaining. Do you want to hear about the history? No. It's really cool. I don't care. I just want my Git repository to work. So what we do is then we turn that into a conference talk. So then we can mansplain at scale internationally, which I think works really, really great. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about what your stories are. Think about how you can tell your stories in a way that encourages your mentees, lifts them up, how your stories can humanize tech, like the stories that we heard today, and how you can encourage those young people, those early in career people, those career switchers, to share their stories. I am so glad that you're here, and I'm so glad that you let me speak here. Everyone was so wonderful. This was really fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Ooh, gift.
Thank you.